Well, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share my research. In the upcoming 40 minutes, I will present the most important findings of a study that we carried out last year on dietary supplements for children with Down syndrome. And first, I will shortly introduce myself. My name is Sandra van der Haar, and I work as a nutrition scientist and a project manager at Wageningen Food and Bio-based Research. This is a research institute in the Netherlands, and we are part of Wageningen University and Research. And in my research group, we work on different projects related to nutrition and health. And I have two main research areas, so clinical nutrition and consumer research. And in clinical research, this is more focused on studying the effects of diets, foods, food products, but also dietary supplements on human health. And consumer research is more focused on the eating behavior and also sustainable behavior. So for example, food waste, and how we can, for example, stimulate consumers towards more healthy food choices. So for the current project that I'm going to present, I was both the lead scientist and also the project manager. So I was both working on the content of the project, but also managing the budget and the planning, etc. But I didn't carry out this research just by myself. So I want to introduce the research team to you. On this slide, you can see everyone who was involved in this study. On the left-hand side, you can see the project team, so the staff and the students who actually carried out the research. And as you can see, a large number of students were involved in the research, and all of them were students from Wageningen University. And in addition, we also had a supervisory board with experts who were also involved in this research, and they provided input and advice throughout the entire project. And these were all experts in the field of nutrition, dietary supplements, or Down syndrome. But the commissioner of the study was the Dutch Association for Down Syndrome, the Stichting Down Syndrome, the SDS. This is how it all started in 2019. They approached the Wageningen University and Research Science Shop. And the Science Shop is in charge of organizing research that is commissioned by non-profit organizations. And mostly they have limited budgets. So this can, for example, be patient groups or foundations or citizen initiatives. And the Science Shop, they aim for direct impact on society with their research. And they aim to create bridges between science and society. So this topic was actually quite suitable for the Science Shop. So the SDS consulted the Science Shop, and the reason they did this was there is often questions coming from parents through their help desk on healthy nutrition, on diet, but also on dietary supplements. And for the study, we decided to focus on dietary supplements. And more specifically, the SDS was wondering if there is any scientific evidence for beneficial effects of dietary supplements in children with Down syndrome, and also what they can advise to parents on this topic, because they receive a lot of questions and sometimes they didn't really know what to answer to that. So the main aim was to study the scientific evidence, but also to translate this into a more practical advice to parents. So that was a bit of background on the topic. Now I will go through the content of my presentation. I'm going to go through the aim and the study population, the research methods, my research questions, the results, which contain fieldwork and also literature results, and then the main conclusion of our study and the advice that we gave to parents, or that we actually gave to the Dutch Down Syndrome Foundation, which they gave to parents. The research aim and study population, we actually had two research aims. The primary aim was to investigate the scientific evidence for the use of dietary supplements in children, so 0 to 18-year-old children with Down syndrome. And the secondary aim was to investigate the current situation in the Netherlands regarding usage of dietary supplements. So how many parents actually give dietary supplements to their child, what are motivations to provide supplements or to not provide supplements, and also to investigate experts' opinions on supplements. So this was to provide a complete overview of the current situation in the Netherlands. And then the study design. Well, the research consisted of two different parts. First, we conducted fieldwork, which was carried out in January until March last year. And this part was executed by 6 master students of the master program Nutrition and Health, but also Health and Society at Wageningen University. And they were supervised by scientists in the research team, but also by a process coach. And they did this research in the context of a consultancy course, which they follow in the last year of their master program. So what they did, they carried out an online survey among 234 Dutch parents. And this survey was distributed through the networks of the Dutch Association for Down Syndrome. And well, total of 234 parents filled in the survey. And furthermore, 5 in-depth interviews were held with professionals and with 5 parents. And an online search was performed to search for dietary supplements which are targeting at Down syndrome. We investigated the claims and also their nutritional content. And then the second part of the study, that was an extensive literature search, was performed from February to July last year. And this search was executed by the scientists in the research team and by 2 bachelor students of Wageningen University as well. And they wrote their bachelor thesis on this topic. They were supervised by Professor Witkamp, who was also part of the advisory board of this project. And in addition, an information specialist executed a systematic search in 2 different literature databases in PubMed and in Scopus. And all these different parts of the literature study were collected and summarized in the final research report. So here you can see the research questions that were answered in the 2 different parts of the study. So first in the fieldwork, we investigated which dietary supplements are being used in practice and by how many parents. What are parental motivations to provide their child with supplements? What do doctors, dietitians, and other professionals advise on this topic? And which dietary supplements for people with Down syndrome are on the market? What do they claim, and do they contain safe doses? In the second part, we answered the following questions by means of the literature study. So is there a theoretical basis in the literature why children with Down syndrome would need or could benefit from dietary supplements? Is there scientific evidence for the effectiveness of supplements? And we studied that in relation to health or cognitive functioning. And if yes, which supplements are effective and in which doses? And eventually we wanted to answer the last question, which practical advice should the SDS give to parents regarding this topic? So first, I would like to show you the main results of our fieldwork. In the survey that was conducted, we asked parents if they provide dietary supplements to their child, and if yes, which type of supplement. And we saw that the majority of parents, 61%, they provide supplements. And these are mostly regular supplements. So here, as you can see, vitamin D, multivitamin or vitamin C supplements. And there was also a relatively small group, 17%, who provide supplement formulas, which are specifically aimed at Down syndrome. And I will come back to those formulas in more detail later. And we also asked the main motivations to provide supplements. And so of the subsample of parents who do provide supplements, so this was 61% of the sample, we saw that the most important reasons were to enhance the immune system because the physician recommended it, or because parents thought that their child might have possibly a nutritional deficiency, or that the nutritional deficiency was actually measured. And we asked the same question in the subset of parents who did not provide supplements. We also wanted to know their main reasons for not providing a dietary supplement. We saw that the majority thought that it was not necessary to give their child supplements, or that they never thought of it. And there was also a small group who said, my child does not want to take dietary supplements. So the master students also carried out interviews besides the survey. They did that with 2 physicians and 2 dietitians, and they are all specialized in treating children with Down syndrome. And the main findings from the interviews were that these professionals were all rather critical on the usage of dietary supplements. And they have a clear preference for obtaining all the essential nutrients from regular diet. And only when there is a nutritional deficiency, they say that dietary supplements can be advised. But first, the preference is always to try and solve these deficiencies by making adaptations in the regular diet. They also thought that high levels of vitamins in some supplements can be alarming. And they also stated that there was no advice for dietary supplements in medical or in dietary guidelines, at least in the Netherlands. And that is because there is insufficient scientific evidence. And there is one exception, which is a daily vitamin D supplement for children up to 4 years old, which is a national advice from the Health Council of the Netherlands. And this advice also counts for children above the age of 4 years old, if the child has a dark skin or if the child does not go outside for a sufficient amount of time per day. The students also interviewed the founder of the MSB NeuroPlus supplement formula. And they also interviewed 5 parents who had different views and opinions on supplement usage for their child. So the MSB NeuroPlus producer, he explained that malabsorption and nutritional deficiencies are more common in children with Down syndrome, and that there is evidence for multivitamins in children without Down syndrome. Therefore, he reasons that well, the usage of a supplement can be advised, and he also reasons that most people in the general population, they do not obtain sufficient amounts of nutrients from their diet. And therefore, a multivitamin formula can be a good way to complement the basic diet. And in parents, the motivations for providing supplements is often a positive change that they notice in their child after supplementation. And another interesting finding was that they sometimes experience a feeling of neglect by the medical experts when they want to discuss the use of dietary supplements, and especially the supplements that are specifically aimed at Down syndrome. So these are the 2 supplement formulas targeted at Down syndrome, so MSB NeuroPlus and Nutrivin D. And they come from Canada and from the US. So on the Dutch market, we could not find any dietary supplements specifically aimed at people with Down syndrome. They cannot be purchased in the Netherlands because there are certain EU regulations who do not allow it. And well, this is based on EU regulation in which the claims are described that are allowed on dietary supplements. They say that medical claims or claims related to a specific disease, they are not allowed. Well, as you can see, both formulas contain a large amount of ingredients. So in the MSB NeuroPlus, there is 36 different ingredients. And in the Nutrivin D supplement, there is 41 in one of the formulas. And there's actually 3 different types of formulas. And in our study, we compared the amounts of the ingredients in these 2 supplements to the recommended dosages and to safe upper limits of vitamins and minerals in the Netherlands. And first, I would like to give you a short introduction to these 2 terms. So when I'm talking about the RDA, which is recommended dietary allowance, this means the level of intake of a nutrient that is judged to be adequate to meet the needs of practically all healthy persons in a population. So for many people, the RDA is more than what they really need. And the recommended amount is actually a target value. to ensure that a person is taking in enough of a certain nutrient. And in relation to supplements, the Netherlands Nutrition Center advises that a supplement is not needed, but if you still wish to choose a dietary supplement, that the nutrients should not exceed the RDA. So should not exceed more than 100%, sorry, of the RDA. Then the upper limit of tolerable intake. This is the maximum level of total chronic intake of a nutrient, which is judged to be unlikely to give any adverse effects or risks to human health. So it means what is physiologically tolerable. And this is a scientific judgment as determined by assessments of several risks. So supplementing vitamins and minerals above this upper limit of tolerable intake can cause serious side effects. And in the Netherlands Nutrition Center, they developed certain recommendations for vitamins and minerals per age category, and they based it on EFSA information. EFSA is the European Food Safety Authority. Well, and they show on their website which are the upper tolerable limits for per age category and also per nutrient. So what we did here, we compared the amounts in the MSB NeuroPlus supplement to the RDA and also to upper tolerable limits. So first you could see that RDAs in the MSB supplement were exceeded for the B vitamins. So for B1, B2, B5, B6 and B12. And regarding the upper tolerable limits, which is explained in this table, they could only be checked for 10 out of 36 ingredients. And this is because there is only certain amounts of nutrients where these upper tolerable limits are established. So we could not compare the whole ingredient list of the supplements, but at least we found that vitamin B6 was exceeded in one of the age categories, so in 15 to 17 years old. And for Nutrivene, we also compared it to RDAs. We saw that there were a lot more vitamins and minerals which were exceeding the RDA. And for the upper tolerable limits, we could only check it for 10 out of 41 ingredients, but we found that they were exceeding B6 upper tolerable limits in all age categories, and for zinc in 2 age categories. So what does that mean exactly, and what are the risks of taking in too high amounts of vitamin B6 and zinc? Well, for B6, exceeding the upper tolerable limits for a longer period of time, it can actually affect the nervous system, causing, for example, numbness or severe nerve pain in the hands or feet. And this is also called neuropathy. And zinc is not stored in the body, so excess intake is resulting in a reduced excretion of zinc. But there are some cases of acute and chronic zinc poisoning, and also too high doses of zinc can cause a copper deficiency, which can also lead to several health problems. So based on these comparisons and on these findings, we concluded that the 2 supplement formulas are not recommended because they contain well, too high dosages of certain nutrients. So then the results of the literature study. As mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, the aim of the literature study, or we had 2 aims with the literature study. So first we wanted to see whether there is a theoretical basis for supplements for children with Down syndrome. And in this part, we mainly looked at mouse studies and preclinical studies. And second, we also wanted to investigate the actual evidence for effectiveness of dietary supplements. And in this part, we looked at intervention studies or clinical studies in children. Yeah, so that were the 2 different parts. And I will start with the theoretical basis. So I'm going to explain 3 different theoretical bases for providing supplements. And I will start with nutritional deficiencies. because we found a higher prevalence of certain deficiencies. So to be more specific, those were deficiencies of zinc, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin B12, folic acid, calcium, and iron. So they seem to be more prevalent in children with Down syndrome, but the literature is not completely consistent on this topic. Mostly in this type of studies, the status of the nutrients are measured in blood in children with Down syndrome, and then they are compared to controls without Down syndrome. And we only found 3 studies that investigated whether children with Down syndrome have a lower or higher dietary intake than children without Down syndrome. But these studies actually showed quite conflicting results. So it's hard to draw a conclusion on this topic. And underlying problems that are more common in Down syndrome, such as celiac disease or use of certain type of medication, malabsorption, typical eating behaviors, or feeding problems, they can also lead to nutritional deficiencies. And we found in literature that they are more common in Down syndrome. So for the next theoretical basis, I should first introduce the term oxidative stress. So what does that exactly mean? Well, a simplified explanation is that oxidative stress is a metabolic state in the body in which the cells produce a greater amount of certain particles. They are called reactive oxygen species. And these react with proteins and DNA, and thereby they can damage the cells. And this can possibly have an effect on the growth and development of the child. And in Down syndrome, there is increased oxidative stress in some cells, which has also been shown in the literature and several studies. But the cause and effect relationship, it is not entirely clear, but improving the antioxidant status in the cells could have beneficial health effects. And in our literature study, we found several mouse and cell studies in which these antioxidants were supplemented and where, for example, cognitive abilities or cognitive decline was studied. And we saw positive effects that were found in a number of studies. But there is a huge gap between these more fundamental studies and what we see so far in clinical studies in humans. And I will come back to that in a few slides. Then Egcg, which is the main polyphenol in green tea extracts. Well, this is a very hot topic. There's currently a lot of scientific research carried out on the potential beneficial effects of this polyphenol. So also in people with Down syndrome. Positive effects of supplementation with this green tea extract were observed in a number of studies. So on all kinds of physiological processes in the cell, on the brain, also on behavior. And these were all mouse studies that I'm talking about. But also in mice, too high dosage also showed negative effects. And it is at this point still unclear how we can translate this possibly positive effect to an advice for children with Down syndrome. I will also come back to this later. So then the evidence from intervention studies. So these are all studies carried out in children with Down syndrome up to 18 years old. And for this part of our study, we set a few inclusion criteria for the inclusion in our literature review, which are the following. The study should be investigating the effects of a certain type of dietary supplement on health or on cognitive outcomes. The study was carried out in children up to 18 years old. We did not include studies in adults because it was out of the scope of our research question. The only exception was if the study sample contained both adults and children under 18 years old in the same study sample. And also the research had to be published in the past 20 years, so from 2001 onwards. And this resulted in a total of 18 clinical trials. And in the next slides, I will shortly highlight a few of the studies that we found. And if you are interested in seeing all the details of these clinical trials, in our research report, we made an overview table of all these studies. And the research report is accessible online, so the link will be shared later. So we categorized the trials per supplement type. And firstly, we found 2 trials with vitamin D and calcium supplementation. And in recent years, there is a growing interest in bone mass density and bone mass quality of people with Down syndrome, since there seems to be a high risk of developing fractures and osteoporosis later in life because of reduced bone mass density. So in this first study, a combination of calcium and a vitamin D supplement and exercise was studied, and this was an intervention of 4 months, and it showed positive effects on bone mass density in 7 to 12-year-old children with Down syndrome. But this intervention was actually according to general recommendations for physical exercise, for vitamin D intake, and for calcium from regular nutrition. But still, the positive effects in the study indicate that adherence to these recommendations can be sufficient to obtain positive effects on bone health in children with Down syndrome. And then the second study, which was only on vitamin D. In this trial, the researchers found that children with Down syndrome who are already deficient of vitamin D, could benefit from a vitamin D supplement for 6 months, and that actually their plasma levels of vitamin D were increased by the end of the study. But they compared this to a control group, and actually there was an improvement, but their vitamin D levels were still lower than the control group by the end of the study. So we also found 1 trial on zinc supplementation and 2 trials of multivitamin and mineral mixes. I will not go into detail. I would like to explain the trials that we found on antioxidants, because there were quite a few, so 10 different clinical trials where antioxidants were supplemented in children with Down syndrome in various age categories. And in summary, these antioxidant supplements, they sometimes reduce oxidative stress levels in blood, but in some studies also no effect was found. This middle one, this was a large randomized clinical trial, which actually lasted 18 months, including more than 100 children with Down syndrome. And they supplemented an antioxidant mixture, but there was no effect on cognitive functioning. So this is what they studied. And there was another trial that we found also with cognitive functioning as a study endpoint. And here there was only a small effect on psychomotor development, but there were no effects on other parameters. So not on sociability, on language, or on coordination. So those are quite conflicting results for antioxidant supplementation. Then for Egcg, the polyphenol and green tea extract, we found 3 intervention studies there. And 2 studies were carried out in young adults, so from 14 to 41 years old. And in this study, actually improvements were found, so positive effects on adaptive behavior, working memory, and quality of life. And this was after 6 or after 12 months of supplementation with green tea extract. And there was another trial which investigated the relationship with body weight and body fat. They also found a positive effect, but the effect seemed to be gender dependent, because it was only they only found it in the men and not in the women of the study. There were also quite a number of limitations to the studies that we included in our literature review. So first of all, the evidence is quite fragmented, which means that sometimes there was only 1 or 2 studies for a certain supplement type. Also, the evidence is quite scarce. And we found a lot of suboptimal study designs. So sometimes the study sample was too small, or the intervention period was too short. Sometimes there was no control group, or the control group was selected from a hospital database. And this is also called historical controls, because the ideal situation would be to randomize the placebo and the intervention over 2 different groups. But we did not find a lot of studies that actually used this randomization method. Another problem was that often a biomarker in blood was the study endpoint, which is a quite indirect measure, because that a biomarker in blood improves, it does not mean that this actually leads to health benefits or to improved cognitive functioning. So therefore, we come to the conclusion that at this point, there is insufficient scientific evidence for cause-effect relationships between dietary supplements and improvements in health or in cognitive functioning. And there are some indication in literature that nutritional deficiencies are more common in children with Down syndrome. Also that oxidative stress levels are elevated and that there is a possible role for antioxidants. And also that green tea extract can potentially have positive effects. And we also found that dietary supplement usage is quite common among parents of children with Down syndrome, at least in the Netherlands. An important research recommendation is that there is a clear need for more well-designed studies, so clinical trials with validated methodologies in children with Down syndrome. But we also saw that it's rather difficult to conduct well-designed clinical studies. And there's also certain ethical considerations. Also, the number of newborns with Down syndrome is declining. So this may explain why relatively few studies have been executed in this target group. So then I would like to go through the practical advice that we gave to the Dutch Down Syndrome Foundation, which they in turn used to advise parents of children with Down syndrome. So first of all, that there is insufficient scientific evidence to recommend dietary supplements, and that a healthy diet according to the national dietary guidelines is extra important, since nutritional deficiencies seem to be more common. Also the daily vitamin D supplement, so 10 micrograms for children under 4 years of age is recommended according to national guidelines. And it's also important to pay attention to sufficient vitamin D and calcium intake for bone health. So when there is feeding problems or when nutritional deficiencies are suspected, the advice is to consult a dietitian, and preferably a dietitian who is specialized in treating children with intellectual disabilities. And when a nutritional deficiency is detected, then supplements can be prescribed to target this specific deficiency if they cannot be solved with adaptation in the regular diet. It's also recommended to follow a personalized approach. So regarding the nutritional deficiencies that I talked about, there's no consistent picture. So therefore, the micronutrient status should always be assessed on an individual level. And blood measurements to investigate whether there are specific deficiencies for vitamins and minerals in blood. They are usually only performed when there is an indication to do so, at least here in the Netherlands. So for example, in the case of celiac disease. But dietitians and pediatrics treating children with Down syndrome, they should also be aware about these nutritional deficiencies that are more common, and they should have attention for manifestations of such deficiencies and check them. Also, the advice to parents is if they still wish to provide a supplement, then it's advisable to choose a multivitamin for children, which is not exceeding the 100% of the recommended dietary allowance. For the specific age category of your child. And a dietitian can also help to advise in which supplement is best to choose. It's good to always check on the label of the supplement whether the recommendations are presented as RDA for children, because we found that on supplements in the Netherlands, sometimes the RDAs for adults are used. So therefore, the EFSA website can be accessed to look up the RDAs per nutrient per age category. And last but not least, I would like to end my talk with the following advice, which is to keep the dialogue on dietary supplements ongoing. I think it's important that experts are understanding and engaging in conversations with parents who provide dietary supplements, even though they might not recommend these specific supplements themselves. They could still check, the dosages with the parents in order to keep the use of the supplement safe. And I think in any case, it's important from both sides to keep the conversation about whether or not to provide a dietary supplement ongoing. Since in the end, all parents want to provide their child with the best and put their child on the first place. The reports of our study and the fact sheet, they are both online. Unfortunately, the fact sheet is in Dutch because it was provided for the Dutch Down Syndrome Association. But the report and the summary, it's all written in English. So if you're interested to read more, you can access the report online by scanning the QR code. And then I would like to thank you for your attention. Also, many thanks to the research team, the advisory board, and to the study participants, because they made a very valuable contribution. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for
Yes.
this great explanation for us, for all parents and experts who are today on this webinar. Now we will go through the Q&A and just go with you with some questions what participants wrote in the meantime during their presentation.
Okay.
Yes, we will start. First, we have okay. First, we had from Jacques Costils, but
Yeah.
it was answered for somebody else later on.
Yeah.
It was
Zinc,
question, what do you think of the
it was
front up
about
of the
front
Grand
up.
Fonte laboratory in Spain to improve cognitives for the person with some problems? Do you know anything about this front up the laboratory Grand Fontaine in Spain?
No, doesn't sound familiar to me, but
yeah,
I'll try to read it in the chat. It doesn't sound familiar to me.
Yes, it's in answer at the moment. No interest in Q&A. Now is in the answered box. Yeah, from Jacques Costils.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Then we will have a comments question from Petra Hladniak. I didn't understand why you could check all the mineral or vitamin only 1 out of 41.
Yes, so this was regarding the safe upper limits. We could only check 10 out of 41 ingredients. And this is because the EFSA, which is the European Food Safety Authority, they only established these safe upper limits for a few vitamins and minerals. But in this supplement, there are, 41 ingredients in total. So it means that we could only check the safe upper limits of the vitamins and minerals that were available through EFSA. So this is why.
Yeah, this is a question why it's impossible
to check all the
check.
ingredients.
Okay, Petra, I hope this your comments why you couldn't. I think Sandra answered as well. Okay, now I will come back from the beginning. Okay, just Salvatore Cassanese comments about actually there are 2 papers about the use of the green tea extract in Down syndrome children and adults. One is the Lancet Neurology 2016 by the De La Torre et al. And the second one is in Clinical Nutrition 2015 by Waka and the group. The deficiency is based on the measurement of MRC activity and not just interviews with the parents.
Yes, this is true. So we, sorry, we also included those 2 studies in our report. Sorry. Because those studies look familiar to me, and indeed, those were actually studies where they looked up, where they investigated the effects of green tea extract in humans. Sorry. But still, we see that there is potentially a beneficial effect of green tea extracts. But still, at this point, it is insufficient to make general recommendations on, what are safe dosages and what can be a good advice for all children with Down syndrome. So, but if you are interested to read more details on those studies, they are also included in our report, in our study report.
Okay. Take breaks or maybe a water.
Yes.
Yes. I will go to read the next one from Dr. Ramani. We have Singha. I don't know. Sorry if I didn't write correct. Just I will say Dr. Ramani on these intervention studies, especially on antioxidants. Are there any meta-analysis studies available?
Yes, there is one, and we also included it in our study report. I'm trying to think of what are the names of the authors. I think it was. Wait, let me check. Yeah, so there's one paper of. Just looking up the authors. Revilia and Martinez. This is a paper from 2020. And these authors, they actually investigated preclinical studies, but so in cell cultures, but also mouse models, and also clinical trials in children and adults with Down syndrome. And they came to the conclusion that even though there is some evidence from these preclinical studies, they could not see any improvements in individuals with Down syndrome. So this is also what we were stressing in our report, that sometimes you can find effects in mechanistic studies, but it's very hard to validate them in clinical trials.
Thank you very much. We have a new comment, a question from Astrid Kreiner. How to supply the green tea extract, via tea or in another way?
Yes, so in supplements, because in tea there is only a very small amount of green tea extract. So this is usually put in higher dosages in a supplement, and this is called Egcg supplement. And I don't know if it's if you can purchase it in every country who's attending today, but yeah, this is a specific supplement.
Yep, thank you very much. One question from Petra Buchanan. You have did studies on oxidative stress and mention in your report that antioxidants are beneficial. Why is testing of oxidative stress not included in the guidelines?
Yes, so this is still very under discussion. So as I explained, sometimes in fundamental studies, you can see effects on this oxidative stress levels, but there's also a lot of other factors influencing oxidative stress. And still there is not enough scientific evidence to put this in treatment guidelines to advise, for example, doctors to check whether the oxidative stress levels are elevated. And it's also not sure if you can improve them with dietary supplements and if this will eventually lead to health benefits. So this is why.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Monica to help me with this question from the Germany, if it's possible. Monica? Kennen Sie die Literaliste bitte veröffentlichen? Okay, Monica, could you see? If not, I will go and then come back to the English translation. Yeah.
Which question?
Yeah, from the Gerard Hammersen. Could you see? Okay, I will. In the meantime,
I cannot see.
Okay, I will try to translate.
I think it says something like, "Can you please publish the bibliography?"
If you could, yes.
Können Sie die Literatur?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you could publish the literature, if it would be possible to give
The references
with the literature.
Yeah, so those are all in
Yes.
our report. So I don't know if the slides will be shared right after the presentation.
Yes.
So there is a link in my presentation and a QR code leading to the website where there is our report. And in the report, we made a reference list with all the literature that's in there.
Yeah, thank you very much. And another question is, are there any dietary supplement to prevent Alzheimer's?
Yes, so this was out of the scope of our research question, but still there were some studies investigating the role of antioxidants and also other supplements in reducing oxidative stress and thereby also the risk of Alzheimer at a later age. So this is mostly mechanistic studies, and some studies do find effects and other ones do not. So this is also very hard to draw a conclusion on. And also there is no studies directly investigating if the risk on Alzheimer's disease is actually reduced.
Yeah, thank you very much. Fulya, I think on this next question, could you help us with this Turkish? Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, it says that during your research, have you found any information about mothers who know that they will have a child with Down syndrome, the pregnant woman, they receive any such sports and such supplements, and whether it is beneficial or not?
During pregnancy,
pregnancy.
Yes. I did find a few of those studies, but it was not in the scope of our project. So they are not included in our research project, unfortunately. So also not in the report, but I know that there are some studies on this topic. So supplementation during pregnancy in relation to Down syndrome.
Yeah, thank you very much. How frequently are children with Down syndrome screened for celiac? It's a question from Elif. Do you know anything about this?
I think in the Netherlands, at least they are screened on the age of 3, but also when they are born for certain risk factors to develop celiac disease. So then they are under larger control. But I think there are several moments where they are screened, at least in the Netherlands. But yeah, I don't know what this is like.
How do you screen celiac disease? From blood or from an using an invasive method? I don't know.
Yeah, I think from blood, and then also nutritional deficiencies related to celiac disease are screened, are checked in the blood.
Yes, it's on the blood in Croatia, what I know as well. Okay, Alexandra, thanks a lot for the QR code for the study report. Thank you very much. Then we go to next one is anonymous attendee. Fulya, could you see this, or maybe somebody else need to help us? Which language is this one?
It is French, I think. In other register.
Yes. It's a question
I can
about
use Google Translation, but I don't know if it is meaningful or not. It said that in another register, the habit, 1 day out of 2 of osmotic laxative, are they harmful for the intestinal biotope of our children? Is it meaningful? I don't know, because it's Google Translate.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody, maybe French translator could help us. Did we say that correctly or not? Okay, I will keep that if somebody could help. Okay, we have again comments and the question from the Petra Buchanan about, are you aware of Down syndromes as an immune disease causing chronic inflammation? Oxidative stress may explain the antioxidant paradox. However, this isn't mentioned in your report.
I think it is mentioned in the report, at least some mechanistic studies, so mouse studies on this theory. So I think, it is included in the report, but then under the theoretical section, so not on the intervention studies, but on the theoretical section of the report.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, again, we have a French.
The other one is that, so do you recommend to take green tea for children with Down syndrome, and from what age? In conclusion, would you recommend green tea, and at what age?
Yeah, no, so at this point, I would not recommend it, because there's still a lot of research going on the safe dosages and also on the potential beneficial effects. So even though there are 2 clinical trials or 3 clinical trials showing some positive effects, there was also a mouse study showing that with too high dosages, it can have adverse effects. So I think, yeah, at this point, there is more research needed before we can make a general recommendation on this supplement. But yeah, it might look promising. This is true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Fulia,
The
next.
Turkish one, yes, is many children with Down syndrome love carbohydrate foods. Is there a reason, or especially for bread? They like bread a lot. Is there any reason for that, or is it a habit of Turkish society?
So I don't know if I understand the question right. What do they lack? Is it something in the diet?
Carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates. Yes.
Like bread, like
Yeah.
cakes, like something like that. Yeah.
In the regular diets, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
They prefer that kind of foods. They like it very much.
Yeah.
And what is your experience about it? Do you know that? Is there any special reason for that?
I have no idea. And also, I think this question is more related to regular dietary habits, I think, in children with Down syndrome. And I know that the Dutch Down Syndrome Foundation, they had several questions on diet and health, also on supplements. And we had to make a decision on focusing on one of those topics. So yeah, I investigated supplements, but I don't know about the other topics. I cannot give any recommendations. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, thanks a lot. We are going to the next question from Marina Marušić-Voice. She asked, what should be done to establish RDA values specifically for Down syndrome? That values are, as far I'm aware, calculated for general population only.
Yes, so they are indeed calculated for the general population, and they are also quite high. So as I explained, I think something like 89% of the whole population will have a sufficient intake if they eat according to those RDA values. So yeah, I think it's not necessary to calculate specific RDAs for specific target groups. And usually if you follow those advices on the RDA, then yeah, you are safe with the nutrient intake.
Thank you very much. A question from Elif. As I understand, parents can be advised to give vitamin D and calcium, or do you still recommend we give a blood sample to look for insufficiency? If so, how often should we screen for insufficiency with blood samples?
Yes, so we found positive effects of vitamin D and calcium supplements, which was combined with physical exercise on bone health. So our advice is to always pay attention to vitamin D, calcium intake through regular nutrition. And I think the vitamin D supplement is for now only recommended for children up to 4 years old. And yeah, screening for insufficiencies, I know that this is in practice difficult because doctors, they do not screen every nutrient. But I heard that in the Netherlands, they are now screening for vitamin D sufficiency more often. So I don't know what this is like in other countries. But this is, yeah, one of the nutrients that can be deficient quite fast. I think not only in Down syndrome, but also in the general population. So yeah, it's always good to pay attention to vitamin D and calcium intake.
Yes, we have heard so many times during the pandemic that it's very good that we check vitamin D and could be helpful because of this coronavirus. It's much better if you have a more highest level of the vitamin D, as in most countries, vitamin D is very low, and in most countries they are not taking care about this value. Maybe only just on the north countries, but in most countries what I have heard, that's a problem about vitamin D. But let's say continue with Svenja Krupp. Why was the question just about supplements for children? What about adults?
Yes, so this was coming from the Dutch Down Syndrome Foundation, and they noticed that these questions arise more often among parents, so for their children. So this is why we decided to focus on children. And also, yeah, because we had limited budget, unfortunately, with this study, so we had to make, we had to focus. So this is why we focused on children up to 18 years old.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have one more question from Petra Buchanan. Why did you focus on the nutritional deficiencies if the main goal of TNI is balancing the extra chromosome, or in brackets, inhibiting the gene overexpression, and the therapy limiting the degeneration and damage?
Yes, so actually, we investigated both, I think, because we looked at nutritional deficiencies, but we also found these studies that are looking at this degeneration and damage. It's just that we did not find, when looking at the scientific evidence in clinical trials, we did not find any trials supporting that. So only mouse studies and cell studies. But yeah, we do pay attention to it in the report.
Yeah, thank you very much. Question comment from the Salvatore. This supplement of Egcg can be purchased in the Netherlands by Life Extension.
Okay.
It's just information.
Good
yes.
to know.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we have it from Dr. Ramani. Thanks very much for the answer of my previous question. Another question is the use of the supplements by Dutch parents. Did you see if there were families in your sample with children without Down syndrome, like example, siblings of Down syndrome? And if the supplement use differed, or were all children given the same supplements, which would just reflect the parents' views of supplement use?
Let me check. Did you see?
Yes, it's a little bit longer.
Oh yeah,
Maybe
no,
it's
we only had we only had the families in the sample with children with Down syndrome, because the survey was spread through the channels of the Dutch Down Syndrome Association. So yeah, I cannot make that comparison, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you very much. One more question from Petra Buchanan. Thanks, Petra. Oxidative stress can be extremely elevated in children with Down syndrome, causing early cognitive decline. In my work, reducing level into normal ranges almost always has a beneficial effect on cognitive function.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you very much, Petra.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, another marker. It's possible that RDAs are different for people with Down syndrome due to additional genetic information.
Yeah, so yeah, I think this one I already answered previously. So there's no difference in that. There's just one RDA for the whole sample. For the whole population.
Yeah, thanks. Petra is now giving us through information. The risk of Alzheimer's is 1 to 3% at age 65 in the normal generation, and the 97% for people with Down syndrome at age 65. Antioxidants alone are not sufficient, but oxidative stress is a prerequisite, as in is a chronic inflammation. I don't know, we could comment. Okay. Thanks, Petra, for this information that we know. And also one more, RDAs are values for a healthy individual population. However, Down syndrome is a metabolic disease and degenerative disease. Therefore, individual parameters like blood, urine, and symptoms are more important.
Yes, and actually this was also one of the recommendations we made in our advices, that personalized approach is very important. Also to check micronutrient status in the blood. But we also know that in practice it can sometimes be hard to convince the doctor to check for certain micronutrient levels in the blood. But yeah, I agree that a personalized approach is the best.
Thank you. And okay, Dr. Ramani now is just adding the, sorry, what I mean is, did you see if parents of children with Down syndrome had other children without Down syndrome? And if yes, if the supplement use varied for them?
Okay, yeah.
But
No, we did.
A little bit explanation for what question
I
before.
get it. Yes, but we didn't ask that. So yeah, we just the survey was targeted at the child with Down syndrome. So this is why the questions on supplement use were about.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And the last one at the moment from Halina Roman. Hi, thank you very much for your research. Could you tell how can I measure oxidative stress? Are there blood tests or what for that?
Yeah, well, there are blood tests for that because we also found that in the scientific literature. So there are certain markers that you can measure in blood which indicates elevated oxidative stress. But I don't think these are, you cannot just go to a doctor and say, I want to measure oxidative stress levels, for example. So this is actually quite complicated.
Dinka.
Yes, I think we come
yes.
to the end.
Dinka, can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you.
Dinka, can you?
Yes.
Okay, there are two more questions in chat session.
Okay, please.
First one is the habit 1 day out of 2 of using osmotic laxatives harmful to the intestinal flora of our children? The first question is this, and
yes.
the other one is did you hear my first question? Yes. Okay.
Yes. So the first question, we also had a look into different types of medication that are more commonly used in children with Down syndrome. So laxatives are actually one of them. They are used for constipation. And when you use them for a longer period of time, these can actually cause nutritional deficiencies on the longer term, or at least cause a higher risk for developing nutritional deficiencies. I don't know by heart which vitamins or minerals those are exactly, but at least you can look up the information in our research report. So yes, indeed, it can cause nutritional deficiencies. That was the question,
and
right?
the last one is it from Isidro? He asked that, do you know the green tea extract? Do you know the green tea extract product named Font Up, developed in Spain?
Yes, no, I did not hear about this this supplement.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thanks, Fulia, for this addition to comments. I didn't see on the Facebook. Maybe could you look? Do we have anybody on the Facebook? I didn't see it at the moment. Sandra, thanks a lot, really, for a very interesting topic. I think that most of us, parents and experts, will continue to searching and to looking. This was for the first step, just on the shortly that we have explanation and what others researchers give us. Fulia, just do you see any comments on the Facebook, or we are going to close for today? I will just wait for a minute to Fulia to check are there any comments on our Facebook site.
Okay, just give a couple of minutes, and there are two more questions.
Yes, please.
It is in Q&A section. There are two more questions. Maybe.
Okay, I will take a look at that until you.
And I will. Yes.
Okay. Okay, it's from Sylvia Fleck. You don't recommend TNI with Nutriven due to the high levels, like example, this some vitamins, but the just a minute, but multivitamin give is okay, or an alternative of to Nutriven with less B vitamin.
Yes, this is correct. So eventually one of the recommendations was to always check the RDAs. And there are multivitamins with lower amounts of vitamin B6, for example. This was actually the one that was there in a high dosage. And it's important to check that it does not exceed 100% of the RDA.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Now we have, for the people who ask about testing oxidative oxidative stress. Petra, thanks a lot. She sent us information. Oxidative stress in blood, lipid. Oh, sorry, now is this coming? A lipid peroxide. I'm sorry, it's jumping all the time. But when you are coming with new Q&A, all of them jumping and I can't read. But this is a very, but okay, I would like to say that Petra said oxidative stress in blood is possible to test. Yeah. That's
yes, I think those are the markers for oxidative stress to measure in blood. Yes.
Yes, Dr. Mani, a comment. Thank you very much for this very informative webinar. When my doctor, Angela Bettoni, was born in 2001 in Oxford, we decided to give her vitamin E supplements based on then available evidence. That was for the first few years of her life. We have no idea if they contributed to her having done very well over these past 20 years. But the fact that 20 years on, there is no convincing evidence seemed to suggest that it was just coincidence. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramani.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of individual success stories, I think, on supplement usage, but indeed, it's hard to find the scientific evidence supporting the claims.
Yeah, and Petra give us one more comment. Nutriven Daily can be adjusted individually for each ingredient via prescription. Thank you very much, Petra. Yes, okay, another one, Salvatore. Okay, I agree with Sandra that oxidative stress cannot be measured by a routine plasma analysis, but it is a common in this. No problem. This is a mostly a redox problem. There is a very recent review of redox biology.
Okay.
Thanks,
well, thank
Salvatore.
you. Yes, thank you very much.
There is no any question on Facebook. Only Sofia says thank you for the webinar from Switzerland. She said thank you from Switzerland.
Yes, also Isidro help with the link about font up from the down in España.
Yeah,
that
I
means
saw it.
we have information. Yes.
Thank you very much for sharing.
Yes, well, it was great. Thanks a lot once again to Sandra. Thanks a lot to Fulia and her whole team. Thanks a lot to Monica and all who are involved in preparation of this, our first webinar in 2022. For all of you who didn't participate on our previous webinars, please go to our Egcg YouTube channel and also to the Egcg Facebook, because there we always have a streaming live on the live, and then also you could see always our webinar. Our next webinar will be in February again. We will inform you when exactly, and you will have all information about our topics. Thanks a lot. Take care and have a nice evening. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.